Greetings, programs, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you are not, also welcome. This week, myself and Simon, who is here, say hi, Simon.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Are going to be talking about two movies like we usually do, but I'm going to do something that I haven't done in forever, which is remember to take care of all the housekeeping stuff at the top of the episode. So,
wow.
I know, right? So, if you have been listening to the show, or if you haven't, just be aware that we do have a Patreon, and that can help us out a lot if you would like to support us. And if you do, you get bonus conversation every week, including this week where we talk about 90s classics that we adore, including Waterworld. And what was the one you spoke about? We talked about Dark City, Species,
Strange Days,
Relic, which is that's not one we love, but it's
no.
It does have things we love in it though, and it's very good.
And then we talk more about Waterworld, and I insult Matt's love of indirectly insult Matt's love of Kevin Costner. You should probably listen to it to find out what happened.
That's not fair. It's not indirect at all, sir.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and before we move on to the show proper, this is just your reminder that we are giving away three digital copies of the movie Blackberry to 3 lucky Canadians. Unfortunately, American friends and worldwide friends, these codes will only work in Canada. But if you do live in Canada, head to our website, which is awesomefriday.ca. The pinned post on the site is our giveaway. There's several ways to enter, and you could win a digital copy of the hit Canadian film Blackberry, which is honestly shaping up to be one of my favorite films of the year, like almost certainly going to be on my top 10. And we got 3 copies courtesy of our friends at Elevation Pictures to give away. So head over to the site and enter, and you could win. And with that, let's move into the show. I mean, it feels weird.
Housekeeping at the top of the show. It's almost like we're a proper podcast. Next, we'll have an advert for MailChimp, and then move into an NPR style introduction.
I mean, let's be honest. Music. It's not going to be MailChimp. It's going to be Skillshare. But but either way, it feels good to remember to do these things at the top of the episode, like professionals. And now we can move into the banter section of the show. So, how are you today, Simon?
Well,
how are things?
I love it. What a start. What a strong start. Good. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, and so I treated her to all the things she would want, apart from a day of silence and freedom from family responsibilities. I gave her lots of stuff. I think the thing I'm going to enjoy the most is the spice grinder and packets of unground spices. Is that the way to describe them? We found a shop recently. So if you are in the Vancouver area, on the corner of Knight and Kingsway is a dosa shop. I'm not sure if you've had a dosa before, Matt. You have, surely you've had dosa.
Yes, I do.
A dosa is, well, I didn't know this. We moved here a couple of years ago, and we've moved into the border between Vietnam Town and Dosa City. And let me tell you, as someone who loves Vietnamese food and dosas, this is a very, very good thing. It's like a really thin, crispy, like Indian breaded pancake with stuff inside, like meat and cheese and spinach and all kinds of things. And behind World of Dosa, or whatever it's called, because we have Best Dosa, World of Dosa, and like Dosa Life, like next to each other. We found this little store that looks like it's nothing, and in fact, you have to go down this ramp, and it looks like it's just a door into a very thin, like, produce section, and it's TARDIS style Indian produce. Like, I don't know if you and Dan like Indian spices and Indian foods like dals and curries and spices, but it just goes right under the restaurant. Just aisles and aisles and aisles of figs and spices and lentils and sweets and biscuits and bread and pakoras and drinks and vegetables, and it's just amazing. So my wife, who's a massive foodie, was very, very happy in there. So I went back there and bought packets of uncrushed spices and a spice grinder. So I'm going to enjoy the fruits of that, I hope. And then we went to Van Dusen Gardens for 4 hours. which is very, very nice. And then we went to Vijay's, which is probably the best Indian restaurant in town, and spent an exorbitant amount of money eating probably the best Indian food I've ever had in my life.
I
So
mean,
it was,
Vijay's a celebrity chef in every sense of the word.
yes.
So
And
it's
he was there and he was lovely. So it was
I would
good.
say that like Vijay's is exorbitant and worth it. Having been there a couple of times in my life, yeah, it's just it's spectacular food. It's one of the best restaurants in Vancouver, I would say.
Yeah. And it was good. The whole day was lovely. Although I got murdered by my daughter completely. I have a 9-year-old daughter that Matt knows very well, so this won't surprise you at all. But she's almost too intelligent. I feel like I need to bring her down a few bring her down a few notches. My wife and I have spent so many years, like trying to give her as many opportunities to read and grow and develop as a person, and we've been too successful in that she is bright and sharp and absolutely murderous. Like we were shopping for a balloon, and they always want to choose a balloon. And I chose the balloon, and she was like, "Can I choose the balloon?" I said, "No, she's my wife. I'm going to choose the balloon this time." She said, "Yeah, but I'm the one who's actually related to her." And I'm just like speechless in the middle of Poundland. Like, oh, you son of a. Yeah, that's a good
First
point.
off,
But
let me just first off just comment on the fact that you just referred to what I assume is Dollarama as Poundland, which is
how many
just
years back?
which is just like that's not what that place is called. And B, there probably is a place called that is very different from what you are talking about.
It's about 5,000 miles away as well. The
Yeah, in the
I
red light district of Amsterdam is where I would expect to find Poundland, sir.
no. Oh my god, Poundland. Oh god, that's even better.
And also,
Poundland.
let me just say, it's also pronounced
Oh,
Poundland.
Poundland.
Just
like Graceland. Sorry, Rachel.
yeah,
Yeah. It's Poundland is very big in Cardiff, and I haven't lived there in 16 years now. So obviously, you can take the boy out of England, but you can't change Poundland to Dollarama intellectually. But
it's just
yes, that's wonderful.
if you want to go to Poundland, man, I'm like it's 2022, 2023. I'm not gonna judge you for wanting to go to Poundland.
I always used to want to go to Poundland every day, but I'm getting old now, and like if I visit Poundland once a week, then I'm doing well.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Middle age, man. Middle age. Youth is
Tell me about it.
wasted on the young.
It really is. Anyway,
And let me.
have
And
you been?
what I was gonna say is that like anytime you watch a movie and there's like a precocious 10-year-old girl and everyone and anyone who's like they aren't like that. Like that's not a person that really exists. No, I can guarantee you, there's a person like that who exists, and it is your daughter, sir.
So I will talk about this next week because one of the things we're talking about next week we has just released on Netflix and we watched it last night. And through that whole movie, myself, my son, and my wife just kept looking over to my daughter, who's there like sat with a big gleeful face because she is being represented on screen as the demonic little spark that she is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
How about you? How's your week been? What have you been up to?
Nothing. I had a very chill week. My work slowed down a little bit, so I spent a lot of time doing things that I haven't really had a chance to do in the last 2 years, like play games. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, right. I've been playing Mass Effect. I'm into the second one,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of
Fine.
get why it landed like it did in 2009 or whatever.
It's fine.
I've definitely seen games like that in the interim. It's not blowing my mind, but it is a really well made, it's a pretty well written story. And they clearly had a ton of money for the second one, what with having
Yeah.
Martin Sheen and a bunch of other celebrity voice
Yeah. Yeah.
actors.
And
Um,
I see you're playing Stellaris as well. I'm enjoying that very much. I've got into that a bit more.
yeah, the problem with Stellaris is that it is exactly my kind of shit. So every once in a while, I'll tell my wife, like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna play games for a few minutes." She'll come in like 4 hours later and be like, "Where have you been? Where have you been?"
I've got to build a mining colony. This star has some helium.
Yeah, and I haven't quite like worked out all the mechanics of Stellaris just yet, but like
Mm,
it. I mean, I'm the guy who still plays original 1992 Master of Orion from good old games. So like it is
that's meant to be really complex. I've heard.
the first one's not so bad. The second one is. but it's a classic. I've been playing that game since it came out
Mm.
30 years ago. And it's again, this kind of thing is exactly my shit. And more importantly,
Hmm.
Stellaris runs on my Mac. In fact, they made a new
Hmm.
version of Master of Orion not that long ago that I own. And when Mac OS went 64-bit only, I
Hmm.
stopped being able to play it.
Yeah, that's
And I
bullshit.
just I haven't scrounged together the funds to purchase a Steam Deck or anything just yet. So when that happens, I'll
Yeah,
be able to play it again.
so fucking annoying. I lost about 30% of my Steam library. Even some things even some new things coming out, indie games primarily, I won't run on 64-bit Mac.
Yep.
But things are starting to get their own like specific Metal OS version, so that's good. But it is bullshit. I hate it.
I mean, I get it. I just also
I don't.
I'm not putting it on. I don't put it on Apple. I put it on the
I don't
developers
get it
for
at all.
there's I guess I start. Here's what I'm trying to say. I don't put I don't think Apple's the problem here. I think that
I
because I think they communicated very early like we're going to 64-bit only. This is happening. You should plan for it. And then all these game companies didn't plan for it, and they're like, well, we can't do it now. And it's like, no, it's just this game that people spent tons of money on isn't currently funding your bottom line, so you're not putting any resources into it. So
I look, I'm not a technically minded person like you are when it comes to the intricacies. I can work my way around computers and stuff. I just know that I've got a gaming PC upstairs that runs anything ever made through either directly or through emulation, and I've got a Mac, an incredibly powerful MacBook Air, which is very fast and zippy. You're telling me it can't emulate 32-bit apps somehow in some kind of wrapper? Effectively, I don't. It pisses me off that it's just locked out tons of stuff. And yeah, not every developer can afford to go back and do a 64-bit re-release of their older games.
I mean, I think the
But
problem is that I mean, the great advantage of Windows is that it's backwards compatible to basically everything. And the biggest detriment and security flaw of Windows is that it's backwards compatible to just about everything. So it's a double-edged sword. Like you can't have the stable you can't have macOS be as stable and secure as it is, and also have the backwards compatibility that Windows enjoys. And I I get why Apple made that choice, and I get that like game developers are like, we make more money from Windows and consoles, so why would we bother with this? But at the same time, it's sort of a double edged sword, right? Like it's not like they didn't have warning. Is all I'm trying to say. Like it's not like they weren't told this was going to happen and then did nothing about it. So it's just a shitty situation all around. It's
mhm.
I hate it. I hate it because like I'm just at my Steam library open right now. If I sort it by currently available to run on my Mac, there are 27 games, and if I remove that filter, there are 110.
Wow,
So I
that's
didn't
bullshit.
I didn't lose 30%. I retained 30%. So
Jesus fuck,
yeah, it's
that's bollocks.
and there's a lot of stuff that like to be fair, at least some of that is like you know stuff I'll never really care to revisit. Um, and stuff that's like dead. Like I have Stargate Resistance. I don't think that game even works anymore because it was an
Mm,
online game, and
yeah.
I don't necessarily need to play the Dig again. But there's a ton of games that like I don't really feel like I need to play Blood Rain again, but I definitely own it. Like and
Mm,
I would like the option. Is all I'm trying to say.
yeah, exactly.
So at some point I'll buy a Steam Deck and then it'll be fine.
That's true. Well, mostly that's mostly true, but yeah.
Actually, every game I've looked up says that it is either compatible or at the very least like untested but works. So
Yeah, I would say 90% of the stuff I try runs flawlessly, even when it says it doesn't. So it is pretty solid.
yeah, good. Well, that's very much like movies. So let's move on. I enjoy that our banter section often has nothing to do with our actual show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. That's not. I'm not joking. I do enjoy that. So let's move on. We're going to talk about two things today: one TV series and one film. The TV series is technically the first two episodes are already out, so we're going to talk about that first. So let's talk a little bit about Marvel's Secret Invasion. Now, the first two episodes of the show were provided to press, um, and they are out now as of this recording. The first two episodes are available to stream on Disney Plus, and they basically follow Nick Fury, who is returned to Earth and dealing with the Skrulls, who were characters introduced in Captain Marvel with Brie Larson. And for those of you who don't remember, the Skrulls are shape shifting aliens. They can take the form of any person, although they do have like a default person they can take the form of. And they've been existing on Earth since the 90s, since Captain Marvel took place, with Nick Fury having promised to find them a new home planet. And now, 30 years on, they haven't got a new home planet, and there's a splinter faction of them who are frustrated and are thinking, well, let's just take Earth then. And that's pretty much the setup of the show. The Skrulls are shapeshifters, so they've been slowly but surely taking the place of various operatives and world leaders and so on and so forth. And now it's up to Nick Fury to deal with the fallout of his failing to keep a promise, whilst balancing his friendship with, Skrull Ben Mendelsohn and a number of other things. And his once protege is, of course, the bad guy. That about covers it, right? That about covers the first two episodes. I watched the second
Yeah,
episode
and
literally right before we watched this, and I will say that if you are super into Marvel stuff, it's probably fine.
yeah, there's an. I don't know if you covered this, but there's an element of the leader of the goodies. His daughter is connected with the leader of the baddies, so you got some familial stuff going on as well. We see more in flashbacks, and
I mean, it's just not
uh,
the problem with it for me is that it's nothing I haven't seen before. Like, oh no, like the leader of the good Skrulls has a daughter, and she is in league with the leader of the bad Skrulls. And like I've seen that story before. Now, it's exceptionally well cast. Like, so Ben Mendelsohn returns as Talos. Um, Emilia Clarke is here as Talos' daughter Gaia. Um, you have Sam Jackson returning as Nick Fury. You have Kingsley Ben-adir as the leader of the bad Skrulls, Gravik. Um, who else? Dermot Mulroney is the new president. Um, who else is there's so many people in the
Don
show.
Cheadle, who I thought was
Yeah,
great in it. I think
yeah,
Don Cheadle's really good in this.
Don Cheadle shows up in the second episode, reprising his role as Rhodey Rhodes. Um, you have Christopher McDonald, who shows up, who he's only in like 3 scenes in the second episode, but as soon as he shows up as the character he shows up as, you're like, yep, that was correct casting. um, and Olivia Colman shows up as I guess she's not Shield, she's MI6, and she's
MI6, yeah.
yeah, and she's like the British version of Nick Fury, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's wonderful. Like, the show is exceedingly well cast, and there's lots to love if you enjoy watching British actors chew scenery. There's going to be a bunch of stuff for you to enjoy. Um, I would say that so far, and again, we're only 2 episodes in to. How many episodes is this show going to be?
6, I believe.
Is it 6 or is it 8?
Yeah, I've seen.
It's only
I saw it's described as a 6-part special series.
right. So it's a 6 episode series. We have seen 2, and by this time you can too. You can go and watch these episodes. So we're not going to spoil them, but like you can definitely go watch them. And so far, given that it's the first act of a story, it's not the conspiracy so far feels super toothless and super boring.
I think that's a good way to put it. It was kind of like, I don't want to be wholly negative because mostly I just don't care. It's not doing anything to make me care. I think it's interesting that you've got this scroll set up where they could be anyone, and it does reflect the 50s communist panic and the MacArthur the whole political movement to get rid of commies, where they could be anyone. It's the same kind of panic that was underlying
It's just
when they
not
thought
doing
spice.
that
But
though.
yeah, but that's what I was going to. Like, it has the opportunity to do that, and it just doesn't. The writing's just not there. I mean, I don't. I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record with MCU now, and it's interesting. When we came back last night, we put on the Avengers, the first Avengers movie,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's night and day. Like the quality in the writing, the directing, but also the tone. Like I don't think any part of the MCU has ever been as good again as the first Avengers. I think they absolutely found it. It almost feels a tiny bit. I want to say the word cheesy, but not in a negative way. Like Avengers feels really, really like
It's
comic framey. Do you know when the zingers? There's lots of comic frame
so I would say
moments.
the thing about the Avengers, the great advantage that the Avengers had is that the terrible person who is the director, writer, and director of that film, and I would argue Ultron, Age of Ultron as well, is really good at A, writing zingers, whether his style works for you or not. It's really his style is really good at just like lacing in zingers, one-liners.
Yeah,
And also he was really, really good at managing an ensemble of characters. And
I think that's.
I think James Gunn is also very good at that.
Mm,
And I don't think most of the rest of the MCU really demand. I mean, it's definitely been demanded of the Russos, and that's a whole other conversation. But I
mm,
don't think. I think that we've talked about. I said this before that like James Gunn is what we all wish Joss Whedon had turned out to be. You know what I mean?
mm,
And
mhm.
I feel like, but I feel like Joss Whedon's terrible person though he is, his dialogue style was just a little bit more friendly than James Gunn's. Like
Yeah,
James, you can
but
definitely tell that James Gunn got his start working for Troma. You know what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
And
yeah,
but either way, what I'm trying to say is that like I feel like a lot of the MCU stuff just doesn't have that quality,
yeah, it
that
really doesn't.
friendly quality, and it doesn't have when it does have the zingers. And this show does have a number of amazing line reads, but I'm pretty confident saying that like that line wouldn't work if it wasn't Olivia Colman, or that
Yeah,
line
so
wouldn't work if it wasn't Sam Jackson, or that line
yeah,
wouldn't work if it wasn't Ben Mendelsohn, who is again I would say Ben Mendelsohn is wonderful in this show. He's really his character has to walk the line between like his loyalty to his people and his loyalty to Fury, and as a friend and as like a political leader. And I think he's doing a really good job in the performance with material that's just a touch slight. So,
it's
yeah,
the it just doesn't feel like the writing now for all these MCU projects. Maybe there's too many of them. Maybe the creative angle has changed. I texted this to you. I think they're chasing an audience that is 10 years too old. I think maybe they're trying to do their Andor here, and they just don't have the quality of ideas or writing to do it. The best. What really stood out for me is that there's one line in the second episode that is a combination of Olivia Colman doing a perfect delivery, but also a genuinely brilliant piece of writing that's about her coming through a door that was locked. And
oh yeah, that is a great line.
I don't want to spoil it because it is like it stands out. The rest of the writing is purely functional. In fact, there's some moments where one character is in trouble and another one who's established to be somewhere else and doesn't know where that character is just appears to save them just because the story needs them to. And it's just that it's really weak. The writing is really weak and kind of it doesn't feel compelling, even though the first episode has some horrific moments that are meant to be compelling that are not compelling at all. But Olivia Colman, this one line that she delivers that is, it almost makes you go, like, it stands out so much. It reminds you of what Marvel used to have all the time, really. When you think back to, it's not just Joss Whedon. You rewatch the first Captain America movie, and that's the quality of that. Just the framing, the scripting, the pace of it. The there's quality in all aspects, and
Hmm. I mean,
that just
I would
doesn't.
argue
It
that
just doesn't. It
I would
doesn't
argue that.
exist.
Sorry, I
It
keep
does.
cutting you
It,
off. Go ahead.
it doesn't. I just want to finish the point that it just doesn't exist in the MCU anymore. And I'm watching two episodes of this that should be a compelling spy drama where you got elements of the Thing. It could be anyone, and it's just like the quality's just not there. And the cast, I love Amelia Clark. I had no idea she was in this. So when she turned up, that was a genuine surprise because she acts with her whole being. Like when she smiles, she like smiles at you, but her dramatic work is fantastic as well. Olivia Colman, you don't need to be told, and Ben Mendelsohn's fantastic as well. And I don't like Kingsley Ben-adir. I think that's a massive miscast. I don't think he's good in this at all. Um, and
It's
but
interesting.
beyond that, I mean, he's won. I googled him yesterday. He's won tons of theatre awards. He's a very established theatre actor. I don't think. I think he's so. I don't buy him in this at all. I think he's so under. He's underplaying everything. Anyway, my main point is I don't care because the writing's not there. Every time they try and use like a race parallel, it's not written well enough. It's just so slapdash, and I just don't. I don't care about anything that's happening that these very good actors are trying to tell me about because the writing and the direction and the story just isn't there. And you made a good point. It would be nice to have for MCU to start making things that I said they should go back to making things that are brighter, a bit more optimistic, and a bit more pacey. And you said, yeah, they should also make stuff where you don't have to have watched everything else to understand. I think that's a really good point because at this point, I'm like, I don't. There's some stuff I haven't seen, or I don't remember this part of Captain Marvel, and I don't remember this part of when he was in the '80s and made this promise. I just don't care about what's going on screen. You know what I mean?
So I would say that in terms of like stuff you need to have seen, Secret Invasion is actually kind of doing well on that front because you really only need to have seen Captain Marvel, and even if you haven't, the second episode recaps literally all the points you need to have seen from that movie. Like
Uh,
there's an intro that's like here's the Cole's notes. Now you know everything you need.
Yeah, I did appreciate that, but I still don't care.
I mean that's fair, and I would say that like I don't think the MCU is devoid of good stuff. I mean just this year, um, it's what 2023, so we've had um what have we had in the last year? We've had Moon
Yeah,
Knight, which I know you loved. We've had She-Hulk. I loved Thor: Love and Thunder. Guardians 3, and the holiday special, which I think I like more than you. Um, and it's
mm,
so for me, it's not so much that like the MCU is bad. I think the only one of these of the recent things that I would say was outright bad and honestly, even Ant Man and the Wasp: Quantumania had a couple of like decent performances in it, so I can't say it's all bad. And I didn't like Moon Knight, but I recognize that at least like I get why people get it. But like I'm just having a hard time. I think the problem here for me is just me because I'm having a very hard time. And I said this to a colleague of ours, Thomas, who is the editor of For Real, that like I just had a really hard time getting excited for this one, and that's my problem. Like, if there is, for a long time, I've sort of denied that superhero fatigue was a thing, and now I am so fucking tired. I'm
mm,
just, I am so tired of all of it, and for me, it needs to be. It can't just be good anymore. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't
mm,
think that Secret Invasion is a terrible show. I do think that for a Marvel show to impress me now, it has to be great. And
mm,
I don't think that is necessarily Endgame's fault because lots of people compare lots of things to Endgame, and I don't necessarily think that it's fair to say that like you know every film needs to have the same stakes as Endgame. I just don't think that's even sustainable storytelling wise.
mm,
Um, but I do need them to be like a cut above. Like I'm having a hard time when they're just sort of okay. And I and there was a time where I would argue that like maybe that's Marvel's greatest strength. Like it used to be that if you were into like science fiction, then great. We have the one where the billionaire puts on a suit of armor. And if you're into fantasy, then great. We have the one where the guy in the Ren Fair costume is a space Viking. And like and if you are into spy stories, great. Then Captain America is an agent of Shield. Like you could just watch all of these things and they didn't need to be interconnected. And I think that what I'm trying to mea culpa my way towards here is that like Marvel's done a really good job of conditioning me to want to see everything. And I think that in allowing that to happen to myself is to my detriment. Like I need it to be okay that I don't care. and I'm having a hard time with that. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense
Yeah,
at all?
it does. I in my head, it's interesting when you're talking about the things they've come out with the last couple of years, and I feel like there's a main part of the MCU. So the Avengers, your Endgames, your anything that Fury does, that like I feel like that's the main through line of the MCU action. And I feel like the things I've enjoyed most from the MCU, I did love Moonlight because it was almost entirely separate from that main run of what was going on. It wasn't really connected to anything in the MCU. It could have been a standalone series about anything. Um, She-Hulk, again, when it worked, felt distinct from everything else. And when the stuff that I in She-Hulk that I didn't think worked so well is when it tried to get back into that main timeline. And so it does make sense what you're saying. I I I wonder what's going to happen at DC because I thought for a long time that Warner Brothers had a really interesting opportunity to forge out after Birds of Prey and which kind of I see a connection between Birds of Prey and James Gunn's Suicide Squad. Like the way those movies are considered are because it took a different route. They together took a slightly different route from MCU and became something a bit more singular, like their own kind of vision. That's more sort of pop culture,
Hmm.
more neon-y. Like I think Kathy Yan was a massive influence into what people want from movies. I'm kind of amazed that Warner Brothers never just delivered a truck of money to Kathy Yan and be like, okay, now do the same with everyone else.
You
Because
can't do that with a girl director who made a movie about
I know,
girls.
tell me about it. Tell me about
Jeez, Simon,
it. They
don't
might
you
put
don't you
lipstick.
read Twitter?
They might
Jeez.
put. They might appear not gorgeous again. Like, oh god.
I
So
mean, that's a silly
I
argument because they are all gorgeous all the time in that movie.
so I read a really interesting Twitter thread that was entirely on Birds of Prey is terrible because there's this one scene where Harley Quinn squirts cheese on her face when she's depressed, ignoring the rest of the movie where Margot Robbie looks absolutely drop dead gorgeous,
Yeah,
and everyone looks drop dead gorgeous. But anyway,
I would ask you to show me
why
that.
do we?
I would ask you to show me that Twitter
No,
thread, but I'm already hit my
no.
maximum views for the fucking day.
Why do we give that these people any brain space anyway? But my point is like DC's got a really interesting opportunity here because I think Marvel's for whatever reason the main through line now and Secret Invasion is really evidence of this as well. Like it Secret Invasion is quite openly violent in a way that a lot of MCU movies haven't been up to the point, or MCU like main through lines haven't been. And I James Gunn's talked about how he wants his DC to be bright and optimistic, and especially in relation to Superman, he wants to go away from that Snyder grayness and get back to what Superman is, which is that iconic blue sky, red flash, Clark Kent smiling kind of Superman,
Hopeful. He wants it to get back to being hopeful.
a hopeful kind of Superman. And I think DC have got a great opportunity here to fill that niche that I think Marvel's missing at the moment, which is remembering what people actually want from comic book movies is actually a bit of bright escapism. Like I watched Supergirl recently. It's not a great movie, but it just feels so much brighter and more zippy and more and the kind of thing I want to watch that involves superheroes who wear costumes flying around beating evil. And I
So
don't know.
I'm going to come back and say that like I don't think that's necessarily 100% accurate because I think that Marvel's
How dare you?
opportunity is the same as I already said it was, that like they could use they have so many properties, and so does DC, but they have so many properties and they have so many opportunities to tell so many different kinds of stories. I think the mistake here is trying to market them as all being the same, because
Mm-hmm.
if they would
Mm-hmm.
actively market Secret Invasion as being, and I don't know how to, I'm not a marketing person, I don't know how to pull this off, but I think if they could market Secret Invasion as being a spy story first and not Nick Fury in a spy story, like
Mm-hmm.
if they would have the wherewithal or the ability or whatever it is to say this one is for adults who like spy films, and then to
Mm-hmm.
say about Loki, like this one is about people who like magic and science fiction, And then when Echo comes out, to be like, this one is for people who like kung fu, and to just,
Mhm.
instead of being like the next adventure in the Marvel universe, just market them as their own thing. Like leave all the
Mhm.
connection stuff in. That's totally fine.
Mhm.
But market them in a more singular way so
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
when you come to the show and it's more violent and a little more grim and dark, you sort of get what you're expecting and not
Mm.
let down by the fact that it's not this other thing that Marvel is
Mhm.
maybe more famous for. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
trying to say? Like, I think they need to. I think that the interconnectedness of these stories is their greatest strength and their biggest Achilles heel,
Mhm.
because it's what they play up and it's what people have come to expect. It's certainly what, you know, influencers, which for better or for worse, like you and I, have come to expect. And
Mhm.
when it's not exactly the same thing over and over again, it's so interesting. But when it's not the same thing over and over again, we're like, well, why isn't it? And I find that super interesting because not even 5 years ago we were like, oh, it's always the same. Why don't we do something different? And then when they even try, we're like, oh, why are they trying? Just, I feel like
Uh,
we've I feel like we've come like full
but
circle
I
on
think,
this because I
but I
feel
think we're
like
both right. We can be right about both things. Though you're absolutely right. The biggest Achilles heel now is they're trying to make it the same thing all the time. They're marketing it as the same story that you have to watch. There's no way my kids who watch the Avengers or Ant-Man can watch Secret Invasion, even though they're saying, "Oh, it's part of the same story." So
yeah.
it should be entirely separated.
And I think, I mean, we tend to reduce these worlds, and like Star Trek and Star Wars especially is guilty of this. Where we reduce entire worlds to single themes, and I think it's a mistake because like we live in a world where the Olympics come to happen, but also wars happen. Where we save people every day and we murder people every day, and there needs to be balance between those things in the media that we have as well. And
Hmm.
I just want I just want Disney to remember that. I just want them to figure out that like the connections are their biggest strength, and I want them to recognize that maybe it's holding them back. And again,
Hmm.
I'm not a marketing person. I have no inside
Hmm.
baseball. I'm not a film producer, but it feels like if they would market it and maybe even use different distribution channels when these things are so different. Like maybe Secret War could be, or Secret Invasion could be a little more violent, a little more grim, and on Hulu in the States instead of Disney Plus.
Hmm.
Like put it on your slightly more adult channel. Like put it in your slightly more adult distribution channel because it's a slightly more adult
Hmm.
show. Not
Hmm.
and to your point that there needs to be like that there feels like there's one main through line. I actually mildly disagree because I think there's at least two or three going on at the moment, and I think that they might do better to. I think that somehow we need to be given permission, as much as stupid as this sounds. I think it needs to be more okay for us to only care about one of them. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, I think it's fine if you're super into Secret Invasion and all the spy stuff in the Marvel universe. I think it's totally cool to like also not give a shit about the fact that they're building the Young Avengers, like very obviously building the Young Avengers.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be okay that um, if whether or not Jonathan Majors comes back, I think it should be okay whether or not you give a shit about them building towards this Kang confrontation with the main team,
Mm.
with this
Mm.
multiverse, with the multiverse. I think
Mm.
that all of those things can exist separately, and maybe they should. And
Mm.
I think that I'm just going to repeat myself again. I think that the fact that they are so interconnected, either practically or via marketing, is again their biggest boon, and they're the biggest thing holding them back. And
Mhm.
I want them to figure that out. And going back to your point about DC, I think having James Gunn in charge, the first thing he announced is that like, you know what, we are going to have a main series, and also the Batman is going to be an Elseworlds title and not be connected.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think that that's smart. I think that saying that like don't expect any connection with this one, there's not going to be, and it frees up those filmmakers to like build his own little Batman universe, right? And we're gonna have, before 2 years are up, we're gonna have a second Batman movie and a Penguin TV show, which are very clearly DC products, very clearly of a tone, and not connected to the bright shiny future
Mm.
that will be James Gunn's Superman legacy. And I think
Mhm.
that that's smart. I think
Yeah, it is really.
comics can be all of those things, and I think they need to
Mhm,
remember that the visual, like the TV and movie version of that, can also be all of those things. Is
mhm.
all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there, absolutely, and I think it's a time to potentially get quite excited about what DC is producing because it sounds like it might fill the void that we've been talking about. I just want quality storytelling. Really, I want nice cinematography, and I want color, and I want quality writing. And I know, oh, is that all you want? Yeah, but
I mean,
it
that's
is
a.
possible to get those things
I mean,
if you
is
pay the
that all?
people to
Is that
do
all
it.
you want? If you say that and someone says, "Oh, is that all?" Then I think your retort to that should be like, "Yes, I want a
Yes.
baseline level of quality in my media, sir."
I
Like,
think I think these people need to start paying more money for writers, and this is what I've been saying about video games for a long time. Like, you can't just have fine writing anymore. You need to. It needs to be interesting writing, good writing,
no, I
and
mean,
or single handedly change Star Wars because they got in a guy who didn't give a shit about legacy and was a good writer, and like it can be done.
yep. I mean, the MCU in particular, their greatest strength has always been that you care about the characters and you care about the performances of the actors playing those characters, and I think we're not going to lose that.
Hmm.
I think their casting department is amazing,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. It is.
And I think that they are also very good about recognizing when they've done something amazing, which is why we're getting an Agatha Harkness TV show. I don't know if that show is going to be any good, but am I going to show up for a 6 episode series or a 9 episode series of Catherine Hahn vamping at the camera? You're goddamn right I'm going to watch that show. You
I'm
know,
not.
like, I mean, I
uh,
love Catherine Hahn. He's incredible, and
uh-huh.
I'm sure I have no faith. I don't know either way whether that show is going to be good, but I will tell you that I will enjoy Catherine Hahn in that show.
Yeah. One last thing I want to
In the same way that I like most of the people in the show we're trying to talk about,
exactly.
right?
One. I think we've probably talked enough about it now, but one thing I want to mention is that I am fascinated by Kobe Smolder's career trajectory. I'm always really, really interested in actors who break out of the molds they've been in for years and years and years. And it's incredibly hard to get out of that rut, as so many TV actors have demonstrated. I'm always fascinated by the ones that get out and establish themselves as something really, really solid in film. And watching Kobe Smulders in this and in the Avengers, but obviously this is the most recent one, and she's really. I would love, love, love to see her lead like a John Wick style action franchise now. I think she's really got great screen presence. She carries off action really, really well. So basically, I what I'm saying is she should be in Fast X Part Two for sure, and then take it from there.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because, and I love Kobe Smulders a lot, um, but she's done that. She had a TV show called Stumptown where she played a hard drinking private investigator, and
What?
nobody fucking watched it.
What was that on? I haven't heard of that.
It was on ABC and I think Disney. I think it's on Disney Plus.
Like,
Um,
I want to see her do an extraction style stunt movie. I think she'd be great in that because she sells it and she's
yeah,
got great presence.
I think that she might be just stuck in. I think she might be just stuck in the Marvel machine at the moment. Because and but the other thing I will say is that like when I have seen her in other things, and again, I appreciate when she shows up, but I've also seen her show up in things like the second Jack Reacher movie. And to be
Hmm.
perfectly clear, she is the least of that film's problems, but
Hmm.
she is one of that film's problems. So like
Oh, really?
it's not a
Um,
good performance. And to your point
oh no.
where she has great screen presence, I think she has there's a there's a big set piece at the end of episode 1 of this show that I think she's really good at. And I also
Mhm.
think she's in the first scene, and I think in that scene, she has one of the worst line reads I've seen in a Marvel thing ever. So
Okay.
you know, it's so min maxed with her,
Hmm.
and when I like her, I think when she's great, I think she's great, and when she's not great, I'm like, really? it's and so I'm sorry, Kobe Smulders. I think most of the time, 99% of the time, I think you're great, and if you haven't seen Subtown, it's a good show. You should totally watch it. And But yeah, occasionally I'm like, maybe you could have used one more take there, you know.
Fair enough.
In fact, you specifically should watch Stumptown because the main other person in Stumptown, she plays a Marine who's a PI, who's trying to dig her like brother out of debt or something like that, or if someone's in debt, she's trying to dig them out of debt. And her best friend and who's a bar owner is played by Jake Johnson, who I know is your man crush. So
Really? Oh, I love Jake Johnson,
yeah,
and
see,
he's always like alcohol related. He's great. Drinking Buddies broke me. What a great film.
yeah.
But
But
yes.
anyway, that show ran for I think one season on
Oh,
ABC,
ouch.
and you should check it. It's not bad.
I'll check it out.
It's a solid network show. You
Yeah,
know, if
I'll check
you
it
know
out.
if you like the likes of like Castle or any of those kinds of shows.
Oh, Castle's not good. You like Castle, don't you? Oh,
I like Castle to a point. Um, I think it's a very good entry in the handsome rogue helps gorgeous female police officer genre.
I can't think of a single other show that would fit that mold.
Uh
Not
huh.
bait. Okay, let's.
That's definitely bait.
So we're not starring 2 episodes of the show, are we? We're not giving opinions, I
I
guess, unless.
mean, if we're gonna give opinions, I think it's hard to rate something having only seen the first act of the story. I would
Mm-hmm.
say that what I've seen is probably fine, but the story is going to be made on the second act twist, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we haven't seen
Yeah.
enough of it, I don't think, to completely say whether it's good or not. But I'll say that what I've seen is perfectly fine. It's perfect. It's fine. It's a 3 star, mildly forgettable, but competently made and acted show.
Mm-hmm.
3 stars, fine. Do
It's
you
two.
concur?
No, it's 2 stars for me. I just don't care.
Yeah, that's fair
Like
enough.
it's not. There's no. The quality's not there to make me care. I just don't care.
I mean, for me, I would say that it is 3 stars just because I get to see Olivia Colman being the good bad guy, or the bad good guy. Because
Yeah.
that line you were talking about, is amazing. You're not wrong, but the interrogation scene, the whole interrogation scene that follows it,
Mm-hmm.
every single thing she says is gold, and
Mm-hmm.
she's only in the first episode very briefly, but every single thing she says is gold, and
Mm-hmm.
as someone who's been watching Olivia Colman since she was on Peep Show and also Mitchell and Webb Look,
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy. I know that everyone loves her as a dramatic actress, but I really appreciate when her comedic sensibilities come out because
Mm-hmm.
I think they really play well with a more sinister character like the one she's playing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
or a
sure.
more morally gray character like the one she's playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Good. Okay, should we move on?
yeah, we probably should. We've been talking too long, but we have a lot to say because it's Marvel. So let's move on. Now we're going to talk about a movie that is a little bit more under the radar, a little bit more indie, but not that indie. We're talking about that next week. Spoiler alert. Um, so, so,
Nice.
so, Simon, why don't you give us the rundown on the upcoming IFC film starring Mark Duplass and Sterling K. Brown, Biosphere?
So I don't want to tell much about it because one of the joys of this film is learning through their really well written conversations what their relationships are, what their history is, and who they fundamentally are. So basically, there are 2 men. Um, it's stuck in a biodome, a biosphere, surviving off their own grown food and their own bred fish, and they are seemingly the only 2 people left. It's not a biosphere experiment like Viking was. This is a survival biosphere, and it's very dark outside. There's no light, and it's their understanding that the Earth is dead. Something bad has happened. Something really bad has happened,
Yeah, I
and
think it's fair to say that they are the last 2 men on Earth.
yes, and they Sterling K. Brown. It's established very very early on, built the biodome, and it's established very very early on that he has been friends for a long time with Mark Duplass's character Billy. Um, but everything else you learn about them, it's one of those beautiful, very theatrical style scripts where there is no Prince of Persia style exposition. Like, you have to pay attention, and you will, if you listen to their conversations, you will absolutely understand what their relationship is in terms of their relationship up to that point and what their positions were in the life before that point. And then that informs things that happen in this movie. Don't don't make the mistake I did, which was, for whatever reason, think this was a character drama, a straight character drama about two people surviving with each other, because there's an element of that, but it's not.
So I would say that
It's
this film is billed as a comedy. I think you could make an argument that it is a quote dramedy, but it is definitely a comedy first. Like it
Yes,
is.
it's a comedy film. It's
Yeah.
very funny. I mean, I don't want to say anything more about it because my main criticism of this film is that I've never seen a film where I have been angry that it wasn't a stage play in front of me. It's written, directed, set, and performed as a two-handed stage play. It would look absolutely beautiful on a proscenium arch stage, and I want to be at the front row of that audience with these two people acting the shit out of this story. And they're both really, really good. I'm not sure I've seen Mark Duplass and stuff. I know you talked about him recently. He's really, really good. He reminds me a lot of Mark. Who was in the wrestling thing? Mark Macron. Mark.
Mark
Uh,
Maron?
the, he was in a wrestling thing, all female wrestling TV show with Annie from
Yeah.
Community.
Mark Maron.
What are you saying his last name?
Mark Maron.
Okay, him. Reminds me of him in his kind of delivery. Sterling K. Brown and Mark Duplass have very different delivery styles, and it represents their two characters here who are very, very different. And it just works beautifully. It's really, really well written. Um, uh, the it uses quite a lot of um, montage to move the story forward, and sometimes I feel like that is a bit of a recurring tool that perhaps he overuses. But I'm being super picky because this film goes places you are not expecting it to go, and if you stick with it, it earns that. It earns the right to go to those places. It does it really, really well, and it actually covers ground that is really tricky to cover in movies, and it does it in a really nuanced way. And that's really all I want to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading over my notes from when I was watching this film, and the first note in my list is how am I going to talk about this?
Because I mean, fundamentally, anything you say about it from that is a spoiler, including.
Yeah, anything you say beyond the setup, which is that they are best friends, they're the last two men on Earth, and they're the only two people on screen. Anything you say beyond that, I think, does a disservice to the experience of watching it.
Mhm.
This film is extremely my shit. In that, if you if you've listened to the podcast before, or if you're one of the few unfortunate people who know me in real life, you know that films that feel like plays are extremely my shit. And
Mhm.
this film, when you say that you're angry it wasn't a stage play, like, yeah, that's a fair reaction because, like, this is an amazing single set, single location story that
Mhm.
hinges on conversation. It's very talky because it
Mhm.
has to be because nothing else is going on. I think they
Mhm.
do more interesting things than they could on, or at least I don't know, more interesting, but they definitely do some things that wouldn't be possible on stage, just in terms of the way
That-
the camera moves. Um, but like that is a very I don't think that's a problem. I think that's just the nature of it being a film instead of a play. You know,
Mhm.
and to say anything more than that would be a disservice to anyone watching it for the first time.
I directed a lot of theatre over 6 years teaching it, and one of my favorite that moment where it gets activated, like the creative thing, is like when I'm reading something or reading a script. I'm like, this is really hard. Like, how can I do this? What's the most creative way I could do this on stage? And I had the same kind of reaction to you. Is like, it does use the camera really, really intelligently, and I was just thinking all the way through all the things I could do to capture that same essence on stage. It just really fired up that old creative urge of me to get the actors out into space and start building. Especially there's one There's one key moment that I would love to find a creative way to do, because you're right, you're not wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you. Apart from the fact that yes, it could be done on stage, but and I want to be the person to solve that problem. It made me quite annoyed that I'm not involved in theatre acting anymore. It really inspired me to do something with it, and it's interesting at the beginning. I think when you watch a character drama, you've got to accept that you've got to pay attention. It's not visual popcorn like a lot of other movies. It will hold your attention through visuals and
So
fancy editing stuff, and uh, and with character dramas, you do have to give it a bit more brain space. And what I loved about this film is that it found a, it does interesting things with what's happening to really get you in and involved, and it didn't feel like an effort to watch it all.
So I would say I'm going to mildly disagree with you that there's no
Ooh.
visual popcorn, because
I
if
don't,
you
you can't talk about that.
no, I was just going to say, if you are, say, my wife, you would consider every single facial expression of Sterling K. Brown visual popcorn. And honestly, she's not wrong. Like the
He's great.
this
He's so good.
he's we already knew Sterling K. Brown was amazing, but he has a couple of line reads in this movie that I absolutely will not spoil. But there's one
Yes.
in particular where he just makes this face that is in that moment all of us,
Yep.
and it's such a memorable moment, and I can't talk about it. It's really
Also, they're great actors clearly, and they're the kind of theatre actors who add color. And the other actor, I think you can sometimes tell when a performer adds a bit of color that wasn't rehearsed or prepared, and it adds to the scene beautifully. And you texted me a moment of when he has a reaction to something, a physical reaction, he starts doing something that I am 100% convinced that that was the first time he did it. And
yeah.
it
I know,
is
yeah, I don't know what you're
so,
talking about.
it is absolutely like perfect. You could not have directed that moment any better. And I think that's him as a performer finding that moment.
Yeah, the moment you're talking about, and again, I'm not going to spoil any of
Yeah,
it,
we got to dance around it.
but the moment you're talking about is, if it isn't the first time that it happened, it's definitely something that just came up as like an improv moment in a
Yeah,
rehearsal, right? Like
yeah,
it wasn't on the script. It was
yeah.
just like it's a perfectly like natural reaction for that character to do this thing at that moment, and
Mhm.
it actually is one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, um, because Sterling K. Brown is great. And what I think you'll find, in case you didn't like realize, but this is the feature length directorial debut of Mel Elslin. Eslin.
I don't know who that is.
So she works with the Duplass brothers. They have a production company. She's the president of their production company. But this is the first movie she's actually directed. She's written movies and produced a lot of movies, but this is her directorial debut, and I legitimately cannot wait to see more from her.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
it-
good.
and this movie I think debuted at TIFF last year, and I think it played at Sundance. I didn't go to TIFF, and I missed it at Sundance. But like, when people ask me what I like about film festivals, it's films like this, because they give
Hmm.
you something that's unexpected, and it's the kind of thing where you can be like, when Mel Eslin eventually does something that makes a much bigger splash, you can be like,
Mm.
I knew that was going
Mm.
to happen because I
Yeah,
watched Biosphere.
yeah.
Like, um, and yeah, the way that they move the camera, the way they interact with the material, and she also co-wrote it with Mark Duplass, and
Mm.
just the way the dialogue works is all incredible, and I cannot wait to see more from her as a director.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I also, you've definitely seen Mark Duplass and stuff, right? Like,
I don't think I have. Like when we talked about him a few weeks ago, I went through his filmography and his work rather, and I don't think I've seen him in anything, but I recognize him.
I mean, he's definitely been in stuff, right? Like, he he was very big in the sort of like mumblecore movement when it was sort of at
Hmm.
its height.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
I
Safety
mean,
Not Guaranteed. There we
yeah,
go.
you've
I just
definitely
remember
seen
that.
Safety Not Guaranteed.
Yeah.
You've what else?
I haven't seen anything else.
You should though. Like he's really really good. If you're enjoying It's Always Sunny, I think I spoke last week about you should maybe check out The League
Mm,
as well, and he's one of the main
mm,
characters in The League.
mhm.
Which you might or might not appreciate because something like 75% of the dialogue in The League is improvised. Like the
Oh,
like
oh.
all the main characters, all the main actors are given like what the scene needs to accomplish, and then they just go. It's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I
I
mean,
know. I
I
haven't seen
really
any of Manhunt either.
I really enjoy him. He's one of my favorite parts of, even though I didn't actually finish season 2, but I really loved him in the first season of the morning show as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And next week for our bonus round, Simon will have watched the best episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is called The Box, and
Oh, is that my homework?
and
Right.
that's your homework. So you can watch the single best episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is Andy Samberg and Andre Braugher interrogating Sterling K. Brown for an entire episode,
Right.
as a suspected murderer. It is. I think I was talking with our dear friend Rachel about this the other day. That like I brought it up because I'd watched it recently, and I think we came to the conclusion that it's the best episode of the series. I think there's other episodes in that conversation, but I think it might be the best single 22 minutes of TV they produced in that show's entire
Mm-hmm. I'll
run.
get on that for
And
sure.
if you like stories with like 2 to 3 characters in a single room talking a lot, like Biosphere, starring Sterling K. Brown, then you're in for a treat, my friend. So, yeah.
Good.
So how many
I would love it.
stars for Biosphere for you? I'm gonna say it's gonna be a 4 for me.
This is a 4-star movie. I want to talk about why it's not a 5.
You can't say anything.
It's a 4-star. It's a very high 4-star movie for me. Um, I really, really, really liked it a lot. And
I
yeah,
would
it
say
is
that
directed beautifully as well.
one of our mutual friends, their letterbox review is, if I gave you 10,000 guesses, you would never guess where this movie goes, and
Yes.
that is
I'm really
correct.
glad though. I'm really glad I didn't even know anything. I tend not to look into movies if I've never heard of them. I like to go in raw, and
You like to raw dog your
experience
movies? Is what you're saying?
raw dog the movies, experience them, naturally. And I don't want to lose any of the sensation of the movie.
You don't
And
want to.
and if I don't really like the movie, I'll just pull out near the end. And but these
Let's be fair. When you pull out near the end for you, that's really like before the end of the first act. So let's just.
Oh, whoa! Hey, some extended trailers are good. All right,
Look, all I'm
like
saying is
I
that.
just like there's a lot to be said for a tight 90.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be minutes, not seconds. But anyway,
Oh Jesus! What
yeah,
was I saying?
it doesn't matter anymore.
Oh, I don't know. 4 stars, very good. Go watch it.
Four stars, and there's nothing we can say about why it's not 5 because that would be
Yeah,
a spoiler.
yeah.
But I fully expect for a certain segment of the audience, this will be a 5-star movie.
Yeah.
I think there's also a segment for which it'll be a 3-star movie. I think that some people might find it to be. I
Too
would
weird.
say I would say that my one major problem, which is not a spoiler, is that at like 110-ish minutes, it's probably about 15 too long. Like it's it's a it's a it's a it's a it's a little bit on the long side for what it's trying to be. Like imagine a
Mm,
really good episode of Black Mirror that's just slightly too long. That's basically what we're talking about here. It's not bad.
I
It's in fact really, really good. It's just
I would
slightly
definitely
overlong.
I would definitely take out a couple of the montages, as I mentioned earlier. I'm not sure that would equate to 15 minutes, but I can see where you're going with that. It didn't feel too long, but yeah, I can see what you're saying. But that's a very minor point. I mean,
I
when
mean,
it's this
again,
good,
it's
like
still a four.
more of good is still good, right? It's still
Yeah,
four
it's
stars.
still a 4-star movie, and like I'm reaching to be like maybe this is what you'll feel, but ultimately, like I'm unreservedly recommending that you watch this film.
There's some great lines. I mean, we can't really talk about any of them, but there's some great lines.
Yeah.
Just the and go watch this movie, and then we'll talk about it in a bonus round another time.
Yeah.
Good. So we know what we're watching next week because I've already seen one of them, and I'm going to see the second one with you on Tuesday. So I'm very, very excited.
That is
about
correct.
next week.
We'll be slightly behind, but next week we will be talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and also another movie which I will be watching soon.
Nimona
Um,
on Netflix.
yeah, so both those movies are out. So if you want to go and watch those two movies, Indiana Jones and
Mm-hmm.
the Dial of Destiny, and Nimona, and then we will keep it as we always do, as spoiler free as possible. But then
Yeah.
maybe if you're worried about listening to us talk about a movie you haven't seen, you can have solved that problem ahead of time. So
There
maybe
we
do
go.
that.
Win-win.
Yeah. So other than that, though, thank you so much for listening. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, thanks for sticking around. And if you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, or subscribes. Smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. All of our episodes are now being auto posted to YouTube as well. So if you are listening on YouTube, welcome. And if you'd like to support us a little bit more directly, we do have a Patreon. And once again, patrons at every tier do get access to our weekly bonus conversations. Which, if you like the main show, you'll probably like those too. They're a little more loosey goosey with what we talk about, but they are, I think, they're just as fun, if not more so. You can find us on the social medias, on Twitter and Instagram at awesomefriday.ca. I am in the process of setting up alternate social media feeds just in case Twitter
Just
continues to
when.
explode for when
Yeah.
it fully explodes. And we'll have that information on the site eventually. But in the meantime, you can also find me at Matthew AF in most of the places that matter, and Simon at Temporary Pen in most of the places that matter. And once again, do head to the website, which is awesomefridays.ca. Right now, we again are giving away 3 copies of Blackberry, one each to 3 lucky Canadians. There are several ways to enter, and you can do that from the website. We record this here in Vancouver on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. And one last time, thank you so much for listening and joining us on this Awesome Friday.
That's fine.